Good morning, guys. This morning we're doing morning devotion. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Good morning. All right, so we're going to start. The scripture is taken from Romans 6, verse 14. That's Romans 6, verse 14. It says, "For sin shall not have dominion over you, for ye are not under, for ye are, you are not under the law, but under grace. Know it true, Lord, because of your presence in my life, the sin that had so much control over me in the past are the least bit excited anymore. You orchestrate that change in me by your grace. I thank you. I thank you too that you didn't create a long list of laws for me to follow, knowing full well I couldn't. Instead, you simply asked me to believe in you and receive the abundant provision of your grace. What a wonderful and awesome way to save me, Lord. I thank you with my whole heart and with my life." So we're going to read the scripture too. The scripture is taken from Romans 6, verse 14. We're going to read it from the New Translation, Romans 6, verse 14. Come on in for those who are coming in. Thank you for joining the live. Thank you. This morning we're doing morning devotion. Thank you for joining the live. So it's Romans 6, verse 14. Romans 6, verse 14 says, "For sin must not be mastered over you, seeing that you are not under law, but under undeserved kindness." So the New World Translation say the same thing. Come on in. Thank you guys for joining. As you guys are joining, please tap the screen. We are having morning devotion this morning. Thank you for joining. Thank you guys for joining. Good morning for everyone coming in. We're having morning devotion this morning. Another part of the text, "The Lord in heaven, your grace is given to me as my birthright in Jesus Christ. Yet still I find myself hardening my heart against others, thinking that they do not deserve my kindness or my time. What a hypocrite I am. Nothing I have ever done has made me worthy of your sacrifice to me, the one who is ever willing to judge others. Please forgive me for my pride. Help me to open myself to all my brothers and sisters. I ask in the holy name of Jesus Christ." This one is kind of like of a self-aware one. You know, you search yourself and you ask Jehovah, through his son Jesus Christ, what is it that you're doing that is not of him? That's a beautiful one. I like that one. Also, if you have any question, you could drop it in the chat. Thank you for tapping the screen. Tap the screen, guys. Just tap on your screen so that other people can hear the live in the mornings. Every morning at 7:30 to 8 o'clock, I do morning devotion. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for joining. Thank you for tapping also. So this morning devotion is taken from Romans 6, verse 14, and says, For sin shall not have dominion over you, for ye are not under the law, but under grace." And then also we're going to do the Bible reading. Every day we read some chapters a day, and I'm at Genesis 37. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you guys for stopping by. Good morning. We're doing morning devotion and we're going to start the daily Bible reading. We're going to start from Genesis 37. That's where I stopped at yesterday. All right. And it says, and Jacob continued to dwell in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. This is the history of Jacob. When Joseph was 17 as a foreigner. This is the history of Jacob. When Joseph was 17 years old, the young man was tending the flock with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, the wives of his father, and Joseph brought a bad report about them to their father. Now, they always say that Joseph was a little informer. He used to tell on his brothers to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his other sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he had a special robe made for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they began to hate him, and they could not speak peaceable to him. Later Joseph had a dream and told it to his brothers, and they found further reason to hate him. He said to them, "Please listen to this dream that I had. There we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field." Listen to this dream that I had. There we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field. Listen to this dream that I had. There we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field. Listen to this dream that I had. There we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field for us because of his dream and what he said. Thank you for joining in the live, guys. Thank you for tapping. Thank you for us because of his dream and what he said. Thank you for joining in the live, guys. Thank you for tapping. Thank you. All right. After that, he had still another dream, and he related it to his brother. "I have had another dream. This time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." Can you imagine? This is where Joseph began to be an interpreter of dreams. He started early off in his age. He was just 17 years old when he started to have dreams, but he could have fully interpret them at that time, what they meant. When he started to have dreams, but he could have fully interpret them at that time, what they meant. Very interesting story. If you read the Bible, starting from Genesis, some very interesting story. If you read the Bible, starting from Genesis, some very interesting story about Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, and all these men of God were mentioned in Genesis. So now we're at Genesis 37, verse 10. Our verse 10 says, "Then he related it to his father as well as his brother, and his father rebuked him and said to him, 'What is the meaning of this dream of yours? Am I as well as your mother and your brother really going to come and bow down to you? What is the meaning of this dream of yours? Am I as well as your mother and your brother really going to come and bow down to the earth to you?' And his brothers grew jealous of your brother really going to come and bow down to the earth to you. And his brothers grew jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in his mind." Why is the live freezing? And his brother now went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. Israel later said to Joseph, "Your brothers are tending flock near Shechem, are they not? Come and let me send you to him." At this he said to him, "I am ready." So he said to him, "Go please and see whether your brothers are well. See how the flock is, and bring word back to me." With that, he sent him away from the valley of Hebron, and he went towards Shechem. Later, a man found him as he was wandering in the field. The man asked him, "What are you looking for?" To this he said, "I am looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are tending flocks." The man looking for. To this he said, "I am looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are tending flocks." The man continued, "They have pulled away from here, for I heard them saying, 'Let us go down to Dothan.'" So Joseph went. "They have pulled away from here, for I heard them saying, 'Let us go down to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brother and found them at Dothan. Now they caught sight of him from a distance, and before he reached them, they began plotting against him to put him to death. This is horrible. This is how brothers and sisters create envy and jealousy in their heart towards each other. Horrible. This was so bad that they were planning to kill Joseph, his own flesh brothers. Because they were jealous and envious of him. Jealousy and envy can really cause people to hate you for no reason. To hate you for no reason. Alright, let's continue reading. So they said to one another, "Look, here comes that dreamer. Come now, let us kill him, pitch him into one of these water pits, and we'll say that the vicious wild animals devour him. Then let us see what will become of his dream." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from them. So he said, "Let us not take his life." Reuben, at least one of the brothers, is going to have a heart towards him. "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Do not shed blood. Throw him into the water pit in the wilderness, but do not harm him." His purpose was to rescue him from them in order to return to the pit in the wilderness, but do not harm him. His purpose was to rescue him from them in order to return him to his father. So as Joseph came to his brother, they stripped Joseph of his and him to his father. So as Joseph came to his brother, they stripped Joseph of his robe, the special robe that he wore. Joseph's father gave him to his father. So as Joseph came to his brother, they stripped Joseph of his robe, the special robe that he wore. Joseph's father gave him to his father. So as Joseph came to his brother, they stripped Joseph of his robe, the special robe that he wore. Joseph's father gave him a special robe. So as of the robe, and they took him and threw him into the water pit. At the time the pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then he sat down to eat. When they looked up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying Lebanon, gum, balsam, and resinous bark, and they were on their way down to Egypt. At this, Judah said to his brother, "What profit would there be if we kill our brothers and cover up his blood? Come now, let us sell him to these Ishmaelites, and do not let our hand be upon him. After all, he is our brother, our flesh." So they listened to their brother. And when the Midianite merchants were passing by, they lifted Joseph up out of the water pit. Oh, the other day I thought some merchants were passing by, they lifted Joseph up out of the water pit. Oh, the other day I thought somebody said they left him there and then some merchant passed, and no, they were the one who lifted him out of that pit and sold him. This is mentioned in Genesis 37 verse 27 and 28. Oh, guys, thank you for the taps. Thank you for coming on. As you know, every morning from 7:30 to 8, we do morning devotion on here. All right, so when the Midianites merchants were passing by, they lifted up Joseph out of the wall. When the Midianites merchants were passing by, they lifted up Joseph out of the water pit and sold him to the Ishmaelite for 20 pieces of silver. The Midianites merchants were passing by, they lifted up Joseph out of the water pit and sold him to the Ishmaelite for 20 pieces of silver. These men took Joseph into Egypt. I wonder how much is 20 pieces of silver worth today. Back then. They were selling people for They were selling people for And he examined it and exclaimed, "It is my son's robe." At his old age, what if he had a heart attack then? Kids were rude and bad back then. With that, Jacob ripped his garment apart and put sackcloth around his waist and mourned his son for many days. Horrible. And all his sons and all his daughter kept trying to comfort him, but he kept refusing to take comfort, saying, "I will go down into the grave mourning my son." And his father continued weeping for him. Now the Midianites sold him into Egypt to Potiphar's, a court official of Pharaoh and the chief guard. Verse 38 says, "About that time Judah left his brother and pitched his tent near an Adulamite man named Hiram. There Judah saw the daughter of his tent near an Adulamite man named Hiram. There Judah saw the daughter of certain Canaanite named Shua, so he took her and had relations with her. And she became pregnant. Later she bore a son, and he named him Er. Again she became pregnant and bore a son, and he named him Onan. Yet again she bore a son and named him Shelah."
Who was Joseph?
Judah, one of the sons.
Oh.
One of Joseph's brothers doing this. Remember, Jacob's name turned to Israel at this point. In time, Judah took a wife for his first son, and her name was Tamar. This is the story of Tamar. Guys, if you ever heard about the story of Tamar, it started in Genesis 38. Firstborn Tamar. But Judah firstborn, was displeasing to Jehovah, so Jehovah put him to death. Wow. You see, back then Jehovah never play with people. Like, from you become displeasing to him, you're put to death. 38 verse 7 says he put the firstborn son, to death. Jehovah himself put him to death. He was displeasing to God. In view of that, Judah said to Onan, "Have relationship with your brother's wife and perform brother-in-law marriage with her and raise up an offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the offspring would not be considered his, so when he did have relationship with his brother's wife, he wasted his semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. What he did was bad in the eyes of Jehovah, so he also was put to death. Do you see how Jehovah used to deal with mankind then when they were disobedient and not following him, his ways? Yeah. So Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Dwell as a widow in the house of your father until my son Shelah grow up." This is the story of Tamar where we were at the church. You remember? When she go, disguise herself and sleep with her father-in-law. It's the story of Tamar. Yeah. And Tamar went to the story of Tamar. Yeah. And Tamar went to stay in her own father's house. Some time passed, and Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. Judah kept the mourning period, and then he went to his sheep shearers in Timnah with his companion Hiram, the Adullamite. Tamar were told, "Here is your father-in-law going to Timnah to shear his sheep." With that, she removed her widow clothing and veiled herself and cover herself with a shawl and sit down at the entrance of Anem, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, and yet she had not been given to him as wife. So this son that Judah was saying, when he grew up, she could get him as a husband. They already married him off to somebody. So she was like, oh my God, how am I going to stay in the family if they already married off the son they said they were kept for me? When Judah caught sight of her, he at once took her for a prostitute because she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, "Allow me please to have relations with you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. However, she said, "What will you give me that you may have relations with me?" To this he said, "I will send you a young goat from my herd." But she said, "Will you give us security until you send it?" He continued, "What security should I give you?" To which he said, "Your seal ring and your card and your rod that is in your hand." Then he gave them to her and had relations with her, and she became pregnant by him. No, guys, just ask yourself, why did she want like a covenant? She wants his ring, she wants his rod, and she wants some kind of cord to seal the deal. She wanted proof that when she get pregnant, she's going to go back and have proof that he's the one who got her pregnant. After that, she got up and went away and removed her shawl. Going to go back and have proof that he's the one who got her pregnant. After that, she got up and went away and removed her shawl and clothed herself with her widow's clothing. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his companion to the Adullamite to get back the security from the hand of the woman. But he never found her. He inquired of the men of her place, saying, "Where is that temple prostitute in Iniam along the road?" But they said, "No temple prostitute has ever been in this place." Finally, he returned to Judah and said, "I've never found her. And besides, the men of the place said, no temple prostitute has ever been in this place." So Judah said, "Let her take them for herself, in order that we may not fall into contempt." "I have sent this young goat, but you never found her." However, about 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law has acted as a prostitute, and she also became pregnant by her prostitution. At that, Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." He knows that the very moment she knows that when Judah find out, he gonna want to kill her too. So she have her proof. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "I am pregnant by the man to whom these things belongs." Then she added, "Please examine to whom these belong, the seal ring, the cord, and the rod." Then Judah examined them and said, "She is more righteous than I am, because of her to Shelah my son," and he had no further sexual relationship with her after that. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. As she was giving birth, one put out his hand, and the midwife immediately took a scarlet thread and tied it around his hand, saying, "This one put his hand," and the midwife immediately took a scarlet thread and tied it around his hand, saying, "This one came out first." But as soon as he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she exclaimed, "What a breach you have made for yourself." So he was named Perez. Afterward, his brother came out, around whose hand the scarlet thread was tied, and he was named Zerah. Very interesting story about Tamar, what she did to carry on the bloodline. I remember one pastor, she was preaching that Tamar was mentioned in the Bible because she was like very, what you call it? She wanted to be mentioned, so she did something to carry on the bloodline of Jacob. Of Jacob. Not Jacob. Not Jacob. What's his son name? Judah. Because Judah is Jacob's son, right? Kind of like missed the point there. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Judah is the same brother that sells Joseph. All right, verse 39 says, "Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and an Egyptian man named Potiphar, a court official of Pharaoh and chief of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. But Jehovah was with Joseph. As a result, he became successful and was put over the house of his master. Jehovah was with Joseph. As a result, he became successful and was put over the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master," I love the story of Joseph. He was destined to be a great man of God, that everywhere he go, God just promotes him. If you want to think about promotion and being raised up by God, Joseph is a perfect story to relate to. His master saw that Jehovah was with him, and that Jehovah was making him everything that he did, making everything he did become successful. All right, thank you guys for joining in the live this morning. We have morning devotion, and we're reading Genesis 39. "And Joseph kept finding favor in his eyes, and he became his personal attendant. So he appointed him over his house, and he put him in charge of all that was his. From the time he was appointed him over his house and in charge of all that was his, Jehovah kept blessing the house of the Egyptian because of Joseph." You see, one person can be present in your house and keep blessing the house of the Egyptian because of Joseph. You see, one person can be present in your house and Jehovah begin to bless your house because of that one person. In your house and Jehovah begin to bless your house because of that one person. That's beautiful. Let me mark this scripture. All right, so all right, so um all right, so um all right, so except the food he was eating. Moreover, Joseph grew to be a well-built and handsome. Now after these things, the wife of the master began to cast her eyes on Joseph and say, "Lie down with me." But he refused and said to his master wife, Here my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has entrusted everything he has into my care. There is no one greater in this house than I am, and he has not withheld from me anything at all except you, because you are his wife. So how could I commit this great badness and actually sin against God? This was a temptation for Job. Actually sin against God. This was a temptation for Job. Actually sin against God. This was a temptation for Job. Actually sin against God. This was a temptation for Joseph, showing but he to remain with her. But one of the days when he went into the house to do his work, none of the household servants were in the house. Then she grabbed hold of him by his garment and said, "Lie down with me." But he left his garment in her hand. He literally. Then she grabbed hold of him by his garment and said, "Lie down with me." But he left his garment in her hand. He literally in her hand and fled outside. As soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she began to cry out to the men of the house and say to them, "Look, he brought to us this Hebrew man to make us laughing stock. He came to me, lie down with me, and I began to cry out on the top of my voice." Such a lying woman. If that's not a lie, Delilah woman, oh, disgusting. Then as soon as he heard me raise my voice, such a lying woman. If that's not a lie, Delilah woman, oh, disgusting. Then as soon as he heard me raising my voice, such a lying woman. If that's not a lie, Delilah woman, oh, disgusting. Then as soon as he heard me raising my, if that's not a lie, Delilah woman, oh, disgusting. Then as soon as he heard me raising my favor in the eyes of the chief officer of the prison. Everywhere Joseph go, he was granted favor by the eyes of the chief officer of the prison. Everywhere Joseph go, he was granted favor by Jehovah God. That's the kind of favor I want. Everywhere I go in this kind of favor I want. Everywhere I go in this world, favor is upon me. But Joseph can't. So the chief officer of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prison again. Look at this. He was sent to prison, and then soon the chief officer liked him so much, he became in charge of the prison and everything that was within it. Wow, profound story, man. Joseph had favor everywhere he go in the world, even in prison. Verses, let's see, 21 to 23. Alright, keep reading. So Joseph was in charge. So the chief, okay, 23. Okay, 22. So the chief officer of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners in prison and everything that they were doing there. He was the one having it done. The chief officer of the prison was looking after absolutely nothing that was in Joseph's care. For Jehovah was with Joseph, and Jehovah made whatever he did successful. If you want to think about a manager, Joseph was like the first manager mentioned in the Bible. Like, he knows how to manage things. Joseph was like the first manager mentioned in the Bible. Like, he knows how to manage things. Joseph was like the first manager mentioned in the Bible. Like, he knows how to manage things. And Jehovah gave him that favor. Verse 40. After these things, the chief cupbearer of the king of Egypt and the chief baker sinned against their lord, the king of Egypt. So Pharaoh grew angry at his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he committed them to jail of the house of the chief of the guard, to a place where Joseph was a prisoner. Then the chief guard assigned Joseph to be with them and to take care of them, and they remained in jail for some time. Now the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in prison, each had a dream in the same night, and each dream had its own interpretation. The next morning when Joseph came in and saw them, they looked dejected. So he asked the officer of Pharaoh. The next morning when Joseph came in and saw them, they looked dejected. So he asked the officer of Pharaoh, who were in custody with him in his master's house, and why are your face gloomy today? At this they said to him, we each had a dream, but there is no. Who were in custody with him in his master's house, and why are your face gloomy today? At this they said to him, we each had a dream, but there is no interpreter with us. Joseph said to them, do to God, relate it to me, please. So the chief cupbearer related his dream to Joseph, saying to him, in my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 twigs, and as it sprouting shoot, it blossomed, and a cluster ripened into grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup. After that I put the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is its interpretation. The 3 twigs are 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will bring you out, restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, as you did before when you were his cupbearer. Yeah, that one was like, I mean, you need God inside to interpret dreams, but that one is like plain out. And Joseph knew what it meant. Nevertheless, you must remember me when things go well with you. Please show me loyal love and mention me to Pharaoh in order to get me out of this place. This is so aligned on destiny, but did he remember Joseph? The cupbearer went back to Pharaoh's house. I forget about Joseph. Anyways, verse 15 says, I was in fact kidnapped from the land of Hebrew, and I had not done anything here for which they should put me in prison. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had interpreted something good, he said to him, I too was in my dream, and there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. And in the top basket there were all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the 3 baskets of white bread on my head. And in the top basket there were all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh, and there were birds eating them out of the basket on the top of my head. Then Joseph answered, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days from now, Pharaoh will behead you. Jesus Christ. That's a horrible dream. You will be hanged on a stake, and the birds will eat your flesh from you. Dear God. Oh, this is so bad. Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he made a feast for all his servants, and he brought out both of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in his presence of his servant. And he returned the chief cupbearer to his post, and he continued to hand the cup to Pharaoh. But he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted. However, the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He kept on forgetting him. Why people do that? When you do good for people, they forget what you have done. I mean, Joseph did take care of them while they were in prison, but he slowly, as soon as he get back that position, he forget Joseph. For those who are joining, we're reading Genesis 40, I'm gonna stop at 40. We just read 40. Let's read 41. At the end of the 2 full years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile River, and there coming up from the river were 7 fine-looking fat cows, and they were feeding on the Nile grass. And there were 7 other cows that looked ugly and thin coming up after them from the Nile, and they stood alongside the fat cows by the bank of the Nile. Then the ugly tin cow began to eat up the 7 fine fat cows. At this, Pharaoh woke up. Then when he went back to sleep, he had a second dream. There were 7 ears of grain coming up on a stalk, full and choice. And growing up after them were 7 ears of grain that were thin and scorched by east wind. And the tin ear of grain began to swallow up the 7 full choice of ear grain. At this, Pharaoh woke up and realized that it was a dream. So both these dreams mean the same. If you go to my YouTube channel, I did discuss about the coming famine and what it meant by Pharaoh having this dream. So you could link my YouTube channel. So you could link my YouTube channel in the bio. And every morning at 7:30 to 8 o'clock, guys, I do morning devotion on here. You could link my YouTube in the channel. I do have a book. It's available on Amazon. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for joining. All right. So we're at Genesis 41, verse 8. But in the morning his spirit became agitated. So he sent for all the magic practicing priests of Egypt and all her wise men. Pharaoh related his dream to them, but there were no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. At that, the chief cupbearer spoke with Pharaoh, saying, I am confessing my sins today. Pharaoh was ignorant at his servants, so he cupbearer spoke with Pharaoh, saying, I am confessing my sins today. Pharaoh was ignorant at his servants, so he committed me to jail of the house of the chief guard. Both me and the chief baker, after that we each had his servants, so he committed me to jail of the house of the chief guard. Both me and the chief baker, after that we each had his servants, so he committed me to jail of the house of the chief. About Joseph too early, then, but God aligned and God's timing. This was the right time for him to start telling Pharaoh about Joseph. Verse 11, 41, Genesis 41, verse 11, it says, After that, we each had a dream on the same night. He and I each had a dream with its own interpretation. And there with us was a young Hebrew man, a servant of the chief guard. When we relate them to him, he interpreted for us the meaning of each dream. It happened exactly as he had interpreted to us. I was restored to my office, but the other man was hanged. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and they brought him quickly from the prison. He shaved and changed his clothes and went into Pharaoh's house. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, but there is no one to interpret it. Now I have heard it said about you that you can hear a dream and interpret it. At this Joseph answered Pharaoh, I need not to be considered. God will speak concerning Pharaoh's welfare. Pharaoh went on to say to Joseph, In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and there coming into the Nile River were 7 fine-looking fat cows, and they began to feed on the Nile grass. And there were 7 other cows coming up after them, poor and very bad-looking, thin. And I have never seen such bad-looking cows in all the land of Egypt. And the skinny bad cows began to eat up the first 7 fat cows. But when the land of Egypt, and the skinny bad cows began to eat up the first 7 fat cows. But when they had consumed them, sorry guys. But when they had consumed them, no one could have known that they had done so, since their appearance was just as bad as the start. At that I woke up. After that I saw in my dream 7 ears of grain coming up on one stalk, full and choice. Growing up after them were 7 ears of shriveled grain, thin and scorched by the east wind. Then the 10 ears of grain began to swallow up the 7 choice ears of grain. So I told it to the magic practicing priest, but there was no one who could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same." The true God had told to Pharaoh what he will do. The 7 good cows are 7 years. Likewise, the 7 good ears of grain mean 7 years. The dream are the same. The 2 dreams mean the same thing. They mean one. The 7 skinny and bad cows that came up about are 7 years, and the 7 empty grains scorched by the east wind will prove to be 7 years of famine. This is just as I had told Pharaoh. The true God has called Pharaoh to see what he will do. There are to be 7 years of great abundance in the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will certainly arise. Guys, are you following along in your Bible? It's Genesis 41. And it talks about the 7 years of famine that will happen in Egypt. So, if you ever want some insight on the famine, then go read Genesis 41. Want some insight on the famine, then go read Genesis 41 and verses 25. Okay. 41 and verses 25. Okay. 25 to about 32. All right, this was the first famine that would happen in on the land, on earth ever. Okay. So 29 says, "And there are 7 years of great abundance in all the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will certainly arise after them. And all the abundance in the land of Egypt will certainly be forgotten, and the famine will exhaust the land." Famine